The workshop smelled of metal polish, synthetic oil, and the faint electrical burn of fusion welding. Nathaniel Forrester hunched over his workbench, magnifying goggles enlarging his hazel eyes to comical proportions as he delicately adjusted the shoulder joint of a standard-issue Guardian Corps battle suit. His fingers, calloused yet surprisingly nimble, moved with practiced precision among the intricate mechanisms. "They said you were the best," a voice called from the doorway. I didn't quite believe the rumors. Nathaniel didn't look up. Workshops closed for commissioned repairs. Requisition forms go through central processing, not directly through me. Even for a priority alpha clearance? That made him pause. He pushed the goggles up onto his forehead, leaving a smudge of grease across his brow as he turned toward the visitor. Captain Sienna Reed stood in the doorway, her tall frame silhouetted against the harsh corridor lighting. She carried her helmet under one arm, revealing a face framed by a short crop of auburn hair and marked with a fresh laceration across her left cheekbone. More concerning was the obvious damage to her specialized infiltrator-class armor. The right shoulder plate was nearly sheared off, and the reactive camouflage layer flickered with electrical malfunction along her entire left side. "Captain Reed," Nathaniel said, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Your reputation precedes you as well. All good things, I hope." She stepped into the workshop, the damaged armor whirring and clicking with each movement. Mostly tales of impossible missions and equipment returned in conditions that give engineering teams nightmares. His tone was dry, but a slight curl at the corner of his mouth betrayed his amusement. Sienna shrugged, then winced as the motion caused something in her shoulder assembly to grind unpleasantly. The mission parameters rarely account for actual field conditions. They never do. Nathaniel gestured to a cleared assessment platform in the center of the workshop. "Let's see what you've done to my handiwork." "Your handiwork?" Sienna raised an eyebrow as she stepped onto the platform. Mark 7 Infiltrator Class Adaptive Combat System, custom-fitted for deep cover operations. I designed the upgrades for the shoulder assembly and the enhanced camouflage matrix. He circled her slowly, professional eyes cataloging every scratch and dent. Serial number RC-117, commissioned 8 months ago. This is one of mine. Sienna looked impressed despite herself. You remember every suit you work on? Only the special ones. Nathaniel reached for a diagnostic scanner. Arms out, please. She complied, extending her arms as the scanner hummed to life. The armor's damage appeared far more extensive under the penetrating beam, revealing hairline fractures and system failures invisible to the naked eye. What happened? Nathaniel asked, his focus now entirely professional. Extraction went sideways. Orbital insertion was compromised, had to drop from higher altitude than planned. Then there was an unexpected welcoming committee. She paused. The mission report says I fell down some stairs. Nathaniel snorted. Must have been quite the staircase. He set down the scanner and approached her, reaching for the manual release catches at her sides. I need to get this off you to assess the internal damage. May I? She nodded, and his fingers found the recessed panels. With practiced efficiency, he disengaged the seals and helped her step out of the battle-scarred shell. Underneath, she wore the standard compression bodysuit, designed to interface with the armor systems and monitor vital signs. Nathaniel carefully moved the empty armor to his workbench, already muttering calculations and parts inventories under his breath. Sienna watched him, rubbing her shoulder where the damaged plate had been digging into her skin. How long? She asked. 3 days, minimum. The camouflage matrix needs complete recalibration, and that shoulder assembly has to be rebuilt from scratch. He glanced back at her. You need medical attention for that cut. Sienna touched her cheek absently. It's nothing. It's going to scar if it's not treated properly. Another one for the collection, then. She moved closer to the workbench, examining the disassembled armor with interest. Director Hayes needs me back in the field as soon as possible. Director Hayes can argue with the laws of materials science if he wants to speed up molecular bonding. Nathaniel's tone made it clear what he thought of such administrative pressure. Sienna smiled, the expression softening her battle-hardened features. I'll tell him you said that. Please do. I've been trying to explain basic physics to administration for years. He began laying out tools with methodical precision. I can give you a temporary replacement suit, but it won't have your customizations. I'd rather wait for mine. She picked up a small calibration tool, turning it in her fingers. This armor has saved my life more times than I can count. Nathaniel gently took the tool from her hand, their fingers brushing momentarily. Then I'll make sure it continues to do so. The contact, brief as it was, seemed to shift something in the air between them. Sienna studied his face, the focused eyes, the stubble that suggested long hours in the workshop, the slight tension in his jaw as he concentrated. You don't remember me, do you? She asked suddenly. Nathaniel looked up, confusion crossing his features. Should I? Academy of Technical Sciences, Northern Division. Advanced Materials course, 7 years ago. You were the guest lecturer who told the commanding officer his protective gear designs were criminally negligent and would get people killed. Recognition dawned slowly on his face. Lieutenant Reed. Front row, asked the questions about reactive polymers that nobody else understood. That's right. Her smile widened. You told me I was the only student worth teaching that day. I remember now. He set down his tools, giving her his full attention. You were brilliant. I expected to see your name in engineering journals, not field reports. Life took a different turn. Her expression clouded briefly. After what happened at Nexus Station, I felt I could do more good on the front lines. Nathaniel nodded solemnly. The Nexus Station disaster had changed many lives, redirected many careers. The massive space platform's catastrophic shield failure had cost thousands of lives and sparked the current conflict with the Meridian Alliance. Well, he said after a moment, your loss to engineering is clearly the Guardian Corps' gain. He returned to examining her armor. Your modifications to the standard protocols are creative. The way you've reconfigured the emergency release mechanism, it's unorthodox but ingenious. Necessity is the mother of invention. Sienna leaned against the workbench, watching him work. When you're hanging upside down over an acid lake with hostiles closing in, you start thinking of improvements real fast. Nathaniel chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. I'd appreciate notes on any other field adjustments you've made. Could help with future designs. Maybe I could come by tomorrow? Provide input while you work? The suggestion was casual, but her eyes held his a moment longer than necessary. I'd like that, he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. 0800 hours? Make it 0700. I'll bring coffee. She straightened, moving toward the door. Real coffee, not that synthetic stuff from the commissary. In that case, I'll even clean up the place. He gestured to the organized chaos of his workshop. Sienna paused at the threshold, looking back over her shoulder. Don't change too much on my account, Master Craftsman. I like seeing how your mind works. With that, she was gone, leaving Nathaniel staring after her, a half-formed thought of their past encounter still taking shape in his mind. He turned back to her damaged armor, fingers tracing over a scorched panel where a blaster bolt had nearly penetrated to the vital systems beneath. His work had saved her that time. He would make sure it would continue to protect her, whatever dangers she faced. With renewed focus, Nathaniel began the meticulous process of mending her armor, unaware that tomorrow's meeting would change both their lives forever. Director Emerson Hayes stood at the window of his office, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the sprawling Guardian Corps headquarters complex. The morning sun glinted off the reinforced glass of the engineering wing, where he knew Captain Reed had spent the past 3 mornings. "Sir," his aide spoke from the doorway, "the intelligence report from Sector 7. Hayes accepted the data tablet without turning. "And Captain Reed's status?" "Still in the armory workshop, sir." 3rd day in a row. Now Hayes did turn, a slight furrow in his brow. "With Master Craftsman Forrester?" "Yes, sir. She claims she's providing technical consultation on her armor repairs." Hayes scrolled through the report, his expression thoughtful. "Interesting. Sienna Reed has never shown much interest in the technical aspects of her equipment before. She typically drops off damaged gear and disappears until it's ready. Should I intervene, sir?" Hayes shook his head. "No. But keep me informed. And schedule a briefing for 1,400 hours. Captain Reed's next mission can't wait much longer, repaired armor or not." In the workshop, Sienna perched on a stool beside Nathaniel's workbench, cradling a steaming mug of coffee between her hands. Her armor lay spread across the table, more complete than the day before but still missing key components. "The energy redistribution system is the real challenge," Nathaniel explained, pointing to the exposed circuitry of the chest plate. "When you took that hit on your right flank, the surge should have been channeled away from your vital systems, but the pathways were compromised." Sienna leaned closer, her shoulder brushing against his. "Could you add a secondary backup route? Maybe through here?" She traced a line along the interior of the armor. "That would work, but it would add weight." Nathaniel frowned, then suddenly brightened. "Unless, what if we use the new carbon mesh conductors? Lightweight, high capacity. Experimental tech?" Sienna raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were a stickler for proven systems. Only when lives depend on them." He gave her a sideways glance. "But in this case, the experimental option might be the safer one." Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Sienna was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how the workshop's usual bustle had faded to background noise. "You know," she said softly, "I requested you specifically when my last armor was commissioned." "You did?" Nathaniel looked surprised. "I thought all special operations equipment assignments came directly from Director Hayes." "They do, but I have some pull." She smiled. "I remembered that lecturer who cared more about saving lives than following protocols. I wanted that same attention to detail protecting me in the field." Nathaniel's hands stilled over the armor components. "I'm glad you did. Not many field agents appreciate the engineering behind their equipment. Not many engineers understand what we face out there." She set down her coffee mug. "You do, though. I can tell by your designs. You anticipate problems most technicians never consider." A comfortable silence fell between them as Nathaniel resumed his work, Sienna occasionally handing him tools before he even asked for them. "Captain Reed," a voice interrupted from the doorway. "Director Hayes requests your presence for a briefing at 1,400 hours." Sienna straightened, her expression shifting instantly from relaxed to professional. "Acknowledged. Tell him I'll be there." After the messenger departed, Nathaniel looked up at her. "New mission already? The armor won't be ready until tomorrow at the earliest. Hayes doesn't wait for equipment." She sighed. "Not with what's happening on the frontier." "What is happening?" Nathaniel asked, then quickly added, "Classified, I know." "Forget I asked." Sienna studied him for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Meridian forces are moving against the Kestrel outpost. If they take it, they'll have a straight path to 3 civilian colonies." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "That's where they're sending you? Without proper armor?" "They'll issue me standard equipment. She shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant despite the tension in her shoulders. Standard equipment won't be enough for whatever they're planning. Nathaniel set down his tools with sudden determination. I can work through the night. Have this ready by morning. Nathaniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. You came to me because you trust my work to keep you alive. I won't send you out there with anything less than your best protection. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them. Sienna reached out, her fingers lightly touching his hand. Thank you, she said simply. The briefing room was stark and utilitarian, dominated by a large holographic display showing the Kestrel outpost and surrounding space. Director Hayes stood at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the blue light of the projection. Captain Reed, he acknowledged as she entered. We've confirmed Meridian battle cruisers approaching Kestrel. Their ground forces are already engaging our perimeter defenses. Sienna studied the tactical display. Extraction mission? Partially. Hayes manipulated the projection, zooming in on a research facility. Dr. Vivian Marceau and her team have been developing a countermeasure to Meridian shield technology. We need her and her data extracted before the outpost falls. Timeline? You deploy at 0600 tomorrow. Hayes glanced at her. I understand your specialized armor is still being repaired. Master Craftsman Forrester assures me it will be combat-ready by then. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Does he? The same Forrester who typically demands extra time for quality assurance? He must be motivated. Sienna kept her expression neutral. He understands the urgency of the situation. I'm sure he does. Hayes switched off the holographic display. This mission is critical, Captain. The technological advantage Dr. Marceau's research provides could turn the tide of this conflict. I understand, sir. Do you also understand why I'm sending you specifically? Hayes fixed her with a penetrating gaze. Your connection to Dr. Marceau makes you the ideal operative for this extraction. Sienna stiffened slightly. My personal history with Dr. Marceau won't interfere with the mission parameters. I'm counting on your history to enhance the mission's success probability. Hayes handed her a physical data chip. Complete briefing details. Memorize and destroy. After the briefing, Sienna found herself walking not toward her quarters but back to the engineering wing. Night had fallen, and most of the complex was quiet, but she could see light spilling from Nathaniel's workshop. He was exactly where she'd left him, but now surrounded by cooling units and energy drink containers. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle as he painstakingly reassembled her armor's control systems. You should sleep, she said from the doorway. He looked up, fatigue evident in his eyes but determination in his posture. So should you. Big day tomorrow. How did you know? Educated guess. He gestured to the armor. Nobody works this hard to rush repairs unless there's something urgent happening. Sienna entered the workshop, closing the door behind her. It's a high-risk extraction. Kestrel outpost. Nathaniel nodded, connecting a delicate wire to an interface port. Then you'll need every advantage this armor can give you. She moved closer, watching him work. The person I'm extracting, it's Vivian Marceau. His hands paused momentarily. Your former partner. Yes. Sienna leaned against the workbench. We were together for 3 years before she took the research position on Kestrel. That complicates things. Nathaniel resumed his work, his movements precise despite his evident fatigue. Hayes is counting on it. Thinks our history will make the extraction smoother. She shook her head. I haven't spoken to her in over a year. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, focusing on a particularly intricate connection. Then, without looking up, he asked, Do you still have feelings for her? The question hung in the air between them. Sienna watched his hands moving steadily over her armor, the same hands that might very well save her life tomorrow. No, she said finally. What we had ended long before she left for Kestrel. The work was always more important to her. Nathaniel nodded, still not meeting her eyes. Then the mission is just a mission. Just a mission, she echoed, though something in her tone suggested nothing about it would be simple. They lapsed into silence, the only sounds the soft whir of diagnostic equipment and the click of components being assembled. Sienna found herself drawn to the methodical precision of his work, the care evident in every movement. Why did you leave the academy? She asked suddenly. You could have had a prestigious research position, safe from all of this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the war and its dangers. Nathaniel finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. Same reason you became a field agent instead of an engineer. Nexus Station. He set down his tools. My brother was stationed there. Security detail. Understanding dawned on Sienna's face. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's not something I talk about. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. After that, designing better protective systems became personal. I couldn't just theorize in some lab while others were out there, vulnerable. Without thinking, Sienna reached out, her hand covering his. Your work makes a difference. It saved countless lives. She paused. It saved mine. Their gazes held, and the air between them seemed to charge with unspoken possibilities. Nathaniel turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. Come back safe tomorrow, he said quietly. This armor will do its part. The rest is up to you. I always come back, she replied with a small smile. Especially now that I have another reason to. As the night deepened around the Guardian Corps headquarters, they remained in the workshop, her armor gradually taking shape beneath his skilled hands, their futures intertwining as surely as their fingers had moments before. The attack came without warning. Nathaniel was making final adjustments to Sienna's armor when the first explosion rocked the Guardian Corps complex. Emergency sirens wailed as the lights flickered, then switched to the red glow of backup systems. Proximity alert, the automated system announced calmly over the chaos. Perimeter breach in sectors 3 through 7. All personnel to battle stations. Sienna was on her feet instantly, reaching for the armor. How functional is it? 90%, Nathaniel replied, already helping her into the chest piece. The camouflage matrix isn't fully calibrated, but all defensive systems are operational. The workshop door burst open. Lieutenant Farah Wong appeared, her uniform disheveled and a laser rifle in her hands. Captain Reed. Director Hayes orders you to evacuation point Delta. Meridian forces have infiltrated the base. How? Sienna demanded as Nathaniel continued to secure her armor with practiced efficiency. Our outer defenses should have detected any approach. They had inside help, Wong replied grimly. Security Chief Dawson is dead, and his access codes were used to disable the early warning systems. Another explosion, closer this time, sent tremors through the floor. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Go, Nathaniel urged, fastening the final connection on Sienna's armor. I'll secure the workshop and meet you at evacuation point Delta. Sienna grabbed his arm. No. You're coming with me now. This section isn't defensible. My work isn't worth your life, she cut him off. Lieutenant Wong, we need a weapon for Master Craftsman Forrester. Wong hesitated. Ma'am, civilians aren't authorized. Now, Lieutenant, Sienna's voice left no room for argument. Wong unholstered her sidearm and handed it to Nathaniel, who accepted it with surprising familiarity. Sienna noted how naturally the weapon fit in his hand. Not my first time, he said, catching her questioning glance. I test all the combat systems I design. The workshop door shuddered under a heavy impact. Wong spun toward it, rifle raised. Back exit, Nathaniel said, moving to a seemingly ordinary wall panel. He pressed a sequence of hidden buttons, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow maintenance corridor. Emergency access to the lower levels. You never mentioned this, Sienna said as they hurried into the passage. Need to know basis, he replied with a grim smile. And now you need to know. The passage was dimly lit by emergency lighting strips along the floor. They moved quickly, Wong taking point while Nathaniel secured the rear. Sienna, in her nearly complete armor, moved with enhanced speed and awareness, her helmet sensors scanning for threats. 2 heat signatures ahead, she warned as they approached a junction. Moving our way. Wong raised her rifle, but Sienna moved past her, the armor giving her enhanced strength and protection. As 2 Meridian soldiers rounded the corner, she was on them before they could raise their weapons. A swift strike to the first soldier's helmet cracked the faceplate, while a precision blow to the second's chest sent him crumpling against the wall. Impressive, Nathaniel commented, checking the fallen soldiers for additional weapons. Your armor, Sienna replied, not me. The armor doesn't move itself, Captain. He handed a Meridian blaster rifle to Wong. Better range than your Guardian issue. Wong accepted the weapon with a nod of thanks. Evacuation point Delta is 3 levels down. Director Hayes should be coordinating the counterattack from there. As they continued through the maintenance corridors, the sounds of battle grew more intense. Occasionally, the whole structure would shake from a heavy bombardment, sending more dust and debris raining down on them. They knew exactly when to hit us, Sienna said as they paused at a security checkpoint. Right before the Kestrel mission launch. It can't be a coincidence, Nathaniel agreed, helping Wong bypass the damaged security panel. They must know about Dr. Marceau's research. The door slid open to reveal a scene of chaos. What had once been a central atrium was now a battlefield, with Guardian Corps soldiers exchanging fire with Meridian forces across a debris-strewn floor. Fires burned in several areas, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of energy weapons discharge. We'll never make it across that, Wong said, ducking back as a blast scorched the wall near her head. Nathaniel was studying the situation with a tactician's eye. The structural supports on the east side are compromised. If we could trigger a localized collapse, it would give us cover to reach the evacuation point, Sienna finished his thought. But we'd need explosives. Nathaniel was already digging through his pockets, producing several small devices that looked like standard engineering tools. Plasma cutters, modified for emergency structural work. At Sienna's raised eyebrow, he added, sometimes you need to remove damaged sections quickly. You continue to surprise me, Master Craftsman, she said with unexpected warmth despite their dire situation. Save the admiration for when we're safely evacuated, he replied, though a faint smile crossed his face. They formulated a plan quickly. Wong would provide covering fire while Nathaniel placed his modified tools at key structural points. Sienna, with her enhanced armor, would draw enemy fire away from him. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Sienna charged across the atrium, her armor absorbing several direct hits as she engaged Meridian soldiers in close combat. Nathaniel moved with surprising agility for an engineer, ducking from cover to cover as he placed his devices with precision. Ready, he called over the comm system integrated into Sienna's helmet. Fall back to the east corridor. Sienna disengaged from combat, sprinting toward the designated position as Wong provided covering fire. Just as a new wave of Meridian troops entered the atrium, Nathaniel triggered his devices. A series of controlled explosions shook the chamber, and with a groaning sound of stressed metal, the eastern section of the ceiling collapsed. Dust and debris filled the air, creating the perfect screen for their escape. They raced down the east corridor, the the sounds of confusion behind them indicating their plan had worked. 2 levels to go, Wang panted as they reached a stairwell. They had descended only 1 flight when a blast tore through the stairwell above them, sending a cascade of rubble down. Wang cried out as a piece of metal struck her shoulder, the impact throwing her against the wall. "I'm fine," she gasped as Sienna moved to help her. "Just a glancing hit." Nathaniel checked the wound quickly. "Clean through the muscle. She needs medical attention, but it's not immediately life-threatening." "I can still fight," Wang insisted, though her face had paled considerably. "We need to find another way down," Sienna said, scanning their surroundings. "The stairwell's blocked." Nathaniel pointed to a maintenance hatch in the floor. "Service shaft. It'll be tight, but we should fit." With Wang injured, their progress through the narrow shaft was slow and painful. Sienna took the lead, her armor's lights illuminating the way, while Nathaniel helped Wang navigate the difficult descent. Almost there, Sienna called back, her helmet sensors detecting a larger space below. "I can see access to level 5. As she reached the bottom of the shaft, a sudden warning flashed across her helmet display. "Movement detected. Multiple signatures approaching the shaft exit." "Meridian?" Nathaniel asked, his voice tense. "Can't confirm. Communications are being jammed." Sienna readied herself at the hatch. "I'll go first. Be ready to retreat if necessary." "We're not leaving you," Nathaniel said firmly. Sienna turned back to look up at him, their eyes meeting in the dim light. "I know." With a smooth motion, she opened the hatch and dropped into the corridor below, weapon raised. To her relief, she found herself facing not Meridian troops but a Guardian Corps security team led by a familiar face. "Captain Reed," Sergeant Talia Durand greeted her. "Director Hayes sent us to find you. He was concerned when you didn't report to Evacuation Point Delta." "We were delayed," Sienna explained as she helped Wang and then Nathaniel down from the shaft. "Lieutenant Wang is injured." Durand signaled to a medic, who immediately moved to assist Wang. "The situation is critical. Meridian forces have control of the upper levels, and our communications network is compromised. Director Hayes is organizing the counterattack from the command bunker." As they moved through the corridors toward the command center, Nathaniel kept close to Sienna. "This attack," he said quietly, "it's too well coordinated. They knew exactly where to hit us and when." "I know," Sienna replied grimly. "Which means we still have a traitor among us."